Buffering. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Be With Artists, episode 113, a very special episode here with our guest, Gleb Alexandrov. And today we're going to be talking about lighting contrasts with Gleb Alexandrov. Talking about EEVEE, cycles, different rendering techniques, the differences between stylism and realism, collaboration, getting into the whole scene of rendering, and also getting a big, massive tease of the upcoming EEVEE course developed by Creative Shrimp. So I'm really excited.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really happy to have you on board as well. Yeah. Everyone's going crazy.
It's an honor for me.
Yeah?
It's an honor for me because you're doing such a great job with this podcast. I've been watching it and I enjoy it a lot. I think it's really amazing what you're doing. So it's always an honor for me. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So before we begin, let's just get a quick overview. I mean, thanks for saying that. I'm glad you watched the other episodes as well. This has been going on for quite some time, but we had some really cool guests. So lighting contrasts and the artwork that you've been teasing. I wanted to first get into an overview of the project. And before, just to give people context, I wanted you to, why are you doing this EEVEE course? What's coming?
Yeah, we've been trying to make sense of EEVEE for a while now. I'm a path tracing guy, an offline rendering guy. I've been using path tracing render engines for ages, and I still do. I was a bit skeptical about EEVEE, to be honest, about the whole thing. But when we actually started researching stuff for EEVEE, I changed my mind. And it's like a complete change of mind. Because seeing what it can do after a few months, and if we account for an extended period of research, maybe a few years, I can tell you it can do a lot. It can look just as realistic as cycles in some respects. There are a few places where it still struggles. We can talk about all of that. But if you've seen the stuff that we've been posting on Twitter, for instance, all these little snippets and animations and renders, it just looks very much on par with cycles, to the point that you cannot distinguish when you see juxtaposition of EEVEE and cycles render like side by side. It reached that kind of point. I'm very proud of it, and I'm very, very eager to start sharing the actual snippets from it with all you guys. I'm so happy to do that, and we still have to create a proper teaser before we can announce the release date and all of that. But the stuff that we've already been posting, I hope it works as a kind of a teaser. Actually, I can see on screen right now the EEVEE versus cycles render. And obviously, it depends on the type of scene that you're trying to render with EEVEE, because not all things that can be rendered with cycles can be recreated with EEVEE, and it doesn't make any sense to even draw such a comparison. But the stuff like global illumination, I don't know, even rendering HDRI content. I mean, not for HDRI monitors, but like using HDRIs to illuminate your scene, like you see here with this still life. By the way, the assets that I used for creating this scene come from Malopolsky Museum. It's basically a collection of digitized photo scans from cultural heritage. And you can find them on Sketchfab. I will probably send you the link later on. And they have a collection of these amazing museum assets, all turned into 3D models. Usually they come with a public domain or the Creative Commons license. So they're free to use basically in both the commercial and non-commercial work, with giving the credit, which I just did. So we're clear with that.
That's true. CC
I find
BY,
it,
correct?
it's super exciting to basically put together quick scenes for experimenting with EV lighting, among other things.
Okay, so I wanted to touch on this topic. Like you mentioned that like EV is getting close to the levels of cycles. There are some things that do not compare. So for example, like I assume refraction and looking light bouncing around in a really accurate way or some other things. But you've mentioned that global illumination has improved, a sense of light fill or light projection, screen tracing, and the specularities and the roughness of things have improved, and also volumetrics. So what got you interested into EV in the first place? You said you're a cycles person. Why did you decide to take on the challenge of using EV?
Yeah, I've been always interested in game development, in games as such, and I was fascinated by computer games since I was a kid, basically. I think the first thing that got me into computer graphics was playing Doom 2,
All right.
back in the day. Obviously, it doesn't look too realistic, but it did. I wanted to create virtual worlds like that, the immersive experiences, something that engulfs you and just consumes you. And I think part of it I converted into my passion for computer graphics, and later on games like Myst, and later on Half-Life, and later on Half-Life 2, they just influenced the way that I formed as a person and as an artist. And part of it was like the drive of real-time graphics, the interactive graphics. Obviously, EEVEE is much more interactive and real-time than Cycles, even with the addition of DLSS and other stuff, which speeds up ray tracing considerably in path tracing render engines. Still, EEVEE both runs faster, and there is a bit of stylized realism look going on with EEVEE, even when we are trying to be photorealistic. This photorealism, it comes with a caveat, with a stylistic flavor to it, which to me it looks a bit like computer games, a bit like you're doing game development, even if it's just rendering in Blender viewport.
Rendering
Maybe in the
offline
future
also.
it will take the form of interactive mode in Blender, who knows. But for me, it already feels as if you're making a computer game when you can wander around your scenes in real time and capture them like you would do in a game, taking screen grabs, basically. And in EEVEE, obviously, you have play blasts, the render preview animation. It was called like that. Now it's officially called render play blast in Blender 5.0. So it really resembles like capturing screenshots and capturing OBS footage or whatever. And some of it runs in real time. I mean, when you say EEVEE is a real-time game engine or render engine, you have to mention that it's like not always like that. And there are cases where you still need a render farm to properly render the final animation if you don't want your computer to stay idle for a while, rendering.
Yes, I guess this comes from the argument of like what is offline and online rendering, which is a term which is similar to like what is the difference between biased and unbiased rendering. So, and just to clarify, when we talk about online rendering, it means we're rendering ours while we're streaming to the GPU real time to the monitor. It is online, it is always processing frames, and usually this is done using raster technology, which calculates different types of hacks or optimizations with different types of buffers on the GPU directly. Meanwhile, offline rendering is the concept of using pre-calculated rays or pre-calculated rendering calculated and buffered onto the GPU VRAM and also computer RAM and CPU. But it kind of does a calculation of the image and then it spits it out. And so you see the final render when it's offline. So EEVEE is kind of like one of those gray areas where it uses online rendering techniques, but at the end of the day, it bakes offline, which means you can scale it to use on render farms. So so it works better in the viewport for what you see is what you get kind of workflow, but you still have to.
Basically, this scene with the bottles was initially created for cycles, and then I basically ported it to EEVEE just to test things on what is probably the hardest use case for EEVEE.
Yes.
Like
So
you've said,
is this
multiple
written?
refractions. Yeah, this is EEVEE. Yeah, there is an
Holy.
animation somewhere in these folders waiting to be played if we manage to find it later on, but don't worry about that. It is, I thought, the hardest thing that you can render with EEVEE. Multiple refraction bounces within glass. Technically, it is pretty much impossible in EEVEE because EEVEE cannot render multiple refraction bounces, 2, 3, or more. It's a breeze for path tracing render engines to do such stuff, but it is super tricky to do in EEVEE. You have to both know the render settings, like inside out, and you have to apply a little bit of hacking, to make it work. Mixing in transparent shaders and using different index of refraction shenanigans to make it seem like there are multiple layers of refraction going on, and you have to combine all kind of hacky approaches on top of just making sense of EEVEE settings, and that is something that we'll actually share. We shared a lot of things already on Reddit and in our Discord channel in form of like screenshots of the shader setups and all of that, just to gather feedback. But we are looking to sharing much more. And I think that this animation was the point where I was like, that is actually working. That is actually working. That doesn't look bad. It looks maybe a bit stylized, if you know what I mean. It still probably doesn't look extremely realistic or photorealistic. You tell me how it looks, but I think it has this stylistic flourish that I was talking about.
That's true. That's another interesting concept. I remember you publishing a course about stylism and realism and different types of MPR styles. Erasers mentions that it looks realistic, but maybe his opinion doesn't count. I think this is incredibly realistic as well, in my personal opinion. But when it comes to stylism and realism, like in my personal opinion, realism in the computer screen is extremely difficult to achieve, mainly because a realistic human experience and observation is with two eyes and with a sense of temperature and presence and time and feeling the breeze. To get that kind of realism is very difficult, and a visual realism is very subjective to how immersed I am, like how small I feel or how big I feel compared to my perception of how something is. So when you say something is stylistically realistic, I think you're very on point. But what's your opinion? How do you define what is realistic and what is stylistic? And what is the gradient that we have between these two concepts?
Yeah, you're so right mentioning that it's a gradient indeed. It's not like we have realism and stylized 3D. It's really a spectrum. It's really a gradient between the two. It goes along multiple lines. It goes along the lines of geometry. It goes along the lines of lighting, materials, camera work, movement within the scene, perspective. All these things can be stylized or brought closer to the realistic pole to different extent. I think you should have seen the Homer Simpson image somewhere on the internet when some artist rendered it in a realistic way. So you still have an exaggerated Homer Simpson facial features, but extremely realistic render of it. It's so uncanny. But actually, it's like multiple layers that you can tweak. Like imagine it has multiple sliders, stuff like that. And I always imagine Hjalti's triangle when we talk about anything related to stylization. There was a talk at Blender conference when Hjalti presented something about making a certain style and stuff like that. And basically there is a triangle, and you have one axis that goes from realism to simplification and exaggeration, but still retains the proportions, the features, more or less. And then you have the axis that goes from realism to non-figurative or abstract qualities. So it's like it's another vertex of that triangle. And the whole space of the triangle is where you can lend your choice as for how far to take it from figurative to non-figurative realm, and how far you can take it towards simplification and exaggeration. Add to that multiple dimensions, lighting, movement, and so on that we've just mentioned, and you get this space of opportunities as for the stylization. And even the individual axes, they go not from 0 to 1, because when you pass realism milestone, you go towards photorealism or hyperrealism or whatever else. You go beyond that, and you come into some sort of stylized space once again, or into this surreal space. It kind of circles back. And when I think about it, I also think about, for instance, the realism in terms of art. The Van Gogh shoes,
Right.
which he painted in Paris in 80, whatever. The realism is not in the render of the shoes. It's maybe the higher order of realism. It tells you some truth about the person that wore the shoes. No, it was bought on a flea market, so it is a real thing. It has a story behind it. So there is a concept of truth that intervenes once you start talking about realism in art, like stylized render or stylized animation or something exaggerated, and exaggerate certain thing for the purpose of telling you certain truth about the world. And the photo that looks completely realistic may obscure the truth by the fact that it seems so real, but actually it's not. It's a falsification or a mystification or whatever it is. So that's a peculiar aspect of realism versus stylized art, let's say.
It's a fascinating outlook of how you target like the different spectrums of another pole in the concept of the gradient between A and B. And White Rooster, we interviewed him here in the show as well. He's done some incredible realistic renderings of Star Trek. He mentions he tends to think of realism as how believable it is, and stylized he considers how neat it is if it were real, which is an interesting concept. But I like your concept, like, yeah, you could have more of an abstract idea, which is more true to the origin and the story of the element over a one-to-one capture of a realistic perception of what something could be. And that's an interesting angle.
Definitely. You can also mention, for instance, the art house cinema from that perspective. Like the one thing that was really prominent in some styles of the art house cinema was camera shake, something that was strictly forbidden in Hollywood movies of the time. It was forbidden in the Hollywood movies because it reveals the person behind the camera. It reveals something else rather than the content of the shot. It breaks the illusion of invisible camera crew. And it hints at the author. So any amount of stylization hints at the author, reveals the author's intention. Even stuff like limited palette. Even stuff like a deliberate composition. Even if everything else is completely photorealistic, it already hints at the figure of the author. So that is also something to think about.
That is true. That was started happening during the postmodern movement, correct, in cinema, which was
Yeah,
film noir and other concepts like that.
yeah, exactly.
I remember that. Well, I don't remember. I wasn't alive then, but I like studying it. That's good. So when it
Yeah,
comes
and
to,
Mhm.
okay,
I just
so,
wanted to mention that the character that is currently on screen was
oh yeah,
created
sure.
by Yo Onaina. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing the name correctly. It is an amazing character model that I asked to give me for EV lighting experimentation. And what you see here is this model rendered in EEVEE. This comes from the character lighting tutorial that will appear on YouTube, I believe, and which will be, if y'all agrees, the part of the course. I enjoyed a lot illuminating a proper character model, which I wouldn't be able to create myself because it requires talent. And then actually, I asked my friend Omar Kivadi and Ahmed Naguib from the Photon Town studio to animate it, and they produced a brief sample of facial animation,
Which I have here.
which we can have a look later on. I thought it is so amazing how a few people coming together, like assembling a mini team for a mini project, can pull off something like that. Character in real time in Blender, rendered in EEVEE. Wouldn't be able to do that alone, and that just shows the power of the community, the power of creating like spontaneous synergy like that. And another thing that we did in a similar collaborative manner was a monster, an alien dwarf by Marlon Nunes. We will try to find that right now. Basically, my tactics were the same. First, I asked if Marlon would be happy to give me the model, and if I asked if he wants to animate it, and he said he's not interested that much in animating it himself. So I was like, okay, and I asked Dem Nico to basically to rig this monster and to animate it. After which,
Good.
Dem Nico said that he's a mechanical rigger, and he would try. And you can see the result of model animated by mechanical rigger. And I think it looks fantastic. It was a pleasure to work with later on, going through lighting experimentation, the real-time subsurface scattering in EEVEE. One of the things that fascinates me most about EEVEE currently is the way the subsurface scattering works. And it can be used for a variety of things. Obviously for skin, but also for example, for simulating translucency in the leaves.
That's true.
I haven't realized that. That was already not my idea. It was brought to my attention by one of the viewers of our YouTube channel, who mentioned that, oh, do you know that actually subsurface scattering can be used to simulate translucency in EEVEE? I was like, no. But then it turned out that it works great. You need to be aware of the thickness input, because not many people using Blender know that there is a thickness input in each material that you can utilize to control this effect. Basically, then you tune in the red, green, and blue contributions of the subsurface scattering shader, its scale. It's also in the subsurface scattering settings. And then the thickness. And these three settings combined produce the results that you currently see on screen. I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah,
you just need to play a
amazing.
bit with the lighting to position the lights in such way to help reveal subsurface scattering that is going on in the tissue. You have to position a few omni lights or whatever, spotlights illuminating the flappy parts. But once you do that, it just works great. That one of the things that works, I would say, better than in Cycles. If you want not a complete like physical simulation of the effect, but an approximation that still looks believable, especially for stylized realism.
Yeah, this piece is absolutely incredible. I'm also blown away that those bottles was EEVEE, and this is EEVEE also. It seems like you've really mastered and done your research. Before we began this talk, we had a slight preamble that the course was taking a bit longer than expected because it required a lot more research to master the effects and things that you were doing, along with the artwork that you had to build for the actual course. So the estimated time for this course coming out is when? Approximately in a month or so?
In a month or so, if all goes well, if I don't burn out completely, but I feel better. And basically, we are almost there. I think we finished recording the bulk of the content, and our first attempts at EEVEE were back in the day with the SSGI plugin for Blender, when real-time ray tracing wasn't a thing. It was 2020 or something like that. So first attempts date back to that time. Then we did other projects and eventually got back into EEVEE, only to discover that now it can be done without any third-party add-ons, with tools already available in Blender. You just have to navigate around the settings, really. Because unlike Cycles, EEVEE requires a lot of fiddling.
This
in
is
Cycles,
true.
like you have the elegance of path tracing. You just turn it on. It just
Done.
works.
Yeah,
Then,
exactly.
depending on the type of the scene, it's either almost real time with the right GPU, of course, because path tracing is still slow, or it is super sluggish. If it's an interior scene with a small window, which Cycles has to trace the light paths towards the light source and stuff like that, it can be really, really sluggish. But it works. It works right away. At the press of a button, you activate real-time viewport and you go. With EEVEE, it's not like that. You activate real-time viewport, it looks like garbage. It looks horrendous. It looks super flat. I think Andrew Price mentioned in one of the videos, in his EEVEE tutorial on YouTube, that maybe it would be better if ray tracing was turned on by default. It would create a much better impression about EEVEE as such. Maybe more people would use it. Maybe this is true. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it was on when EEVEE Next first came out in 4.2, but I think they turned it off because there were some
Maybe there are
issues.
reasons. Maybe there are
Yeah, the
reasons
reason was
for
performance with people's
compatibility.
GPUs. Some
Yeah,
GPUs
makes sense.
weren't
But
able to do
basically,
it.
what I wanted to say is that in EEVEE, you have to fiddle around with the settings. When you know the settings and just how to set them properly, for instance, like if you know that you need to disable denoising right away in EEVEE, because it mangles all kind of effects, from specular reflections to God knows what else, to the clarity of textures. Like you can see here on this screenshot, once you turn it off, and once you turn off the fast GUI approximation, you're left with pure screen tracing. And pure screen tracing in EEVEE works, I wouldn't say just as good as Cycles path tracing, because it's still screen tracing. You cannot see beyond the screen. There are things that you can do to kind of extend the reach of what EEVEE can see on screen, but it's still screen tracing.
Yeah,
But when you use the pure version of it, without denoising and without fast GI approximation, it's so much better. I think earlier on you showed the car render, the car wreck in the forest type of scene. It's rendered using the just gray backdrop and EEVEE's ray tracing. Just need to turn off these settings, and it doesn't even use ambient occlusion overlaid on top of it, because EEVEE's ray tracing already simulates ambient occlusion like all ray tracing algorithms do. Ambient occlusion comes as a bonus. Yeah, right. You can see on screen right now the comparison between the simplified scene for testing HDRI renders in EEVEE and in cycles. It's very unforgiving because there is just this lighting information and basically gray materials, and you cannot really hide behind textures and details and stuff. So you have to be really precise with what you do with HDRIs. So yeah, it boils down to the ray tracing settings. And then what did I want to say? So you can make it pretty much one-to-one match. You will miss a few details that are available in cycles by default. Like for instance, if we snap back to that table scene with a still live shot, by default you wouldn't be able to block the front light in EEVEE, because what you do in cycles when setting up a cinematic render like that, cinematic meaning when you prioritize having a lot of depth, a lot of dimension, and you try to reveal the shape of the objects, you usually block the frontal light spill. If you think like cinematographer or whatever, just place an object behind the camera in cycles. Basically, the black object with no reflection. It sucks the light. And you block the frontal spill, and out of a sudden, you get a reversed key lighting going on. You get a nice light wrap. You get nice silhouettes, outlines, and soft light just gently wrapping around everything. In EEVEE, when you place the object behind the camera, it does nothing, because EEVEE doesn't see behind the camera. And here you can see that I blocked the light in this scene. You can do that by manipulating the HDRI itself. So HDRI is, as all of us remember, the full 360 degrees environment, projecting light into the scene. So when you apply the gradient to cut out the the stuff behind the camera to turn it black, it works almost the same as placing the blocker object behind the camera, and you get yourself a nice lighting this way. Yeah, this is exactly the screenshot I was talking about. This seems trivial when you work in cycles. But in EEVEE, it requires a little bit of different mindset. Not all people enjoy that type of mindset when you need to basically think like an artist, perhaps. It makes me think of the movie Flow. I was talking recently to Martin Eupitis, who designed water for Flow.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and he basically said the same thing. I think I was discussing the water shaders with Martins. And he said, yes, EEVEE cannot do it. The thing that I was wanting to replicate in EEVEE. But you can think like an artist. You can do it in this way. Basically, you need to think a little bit creatively. So EEVEE does require this mindset. Because by default, depth of field doesn't look absolutely the same like in cycles. You need to fiddle with it. If your scene has a super ambient lighting, you will have some problems. Like, EEVEE hates really big soft lights. You have to work around that issue. And in EEVEE, what really bamboozles me is there is no beam spread in the area light. The beam, you can't control the beam shape parameter, like here on this screenshot. In cycles, you would just adjust the beam spread to achieve all kinds of effects. If you set it to 0, you achieve basically the sunlight. But it is contained just to this area light, so it's very convenient. It works similarly to using the Fresnel lens in real cameras, in real light sources, where you can focus the beam. In EEVEE, you cannot do that, frustratingly as it sounds. But we will recreate this in EEVEE using basically we will MacGyver it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've often used what they call flags when it comes to these types of lights. So I'd use like a sun lamp or a very far away, super strong spotlight, and then use a square flag or a piece of geometry to block the shadow. I would use that often.
That's what I would try myself. But after using spotlights in EEVEE and moving them far away, I quickly realized that it's really problematic because EEVEE uses cascading shadow maps. So when you move lights far away, the shadow maps lose resolution, so it wouldn't work. You need something else, basically. But it's good that you can play with the light groups and shadow groups. For instance, to be able to use sunlight even in enclosed environments like this one that you see on screen right now. You can play with that. You can basically use sunlight, then just allow it into any kind of environment. Again, it's a little bit fiddly, but it works brilliantly. And specifically in this scene, when you have a little bit of sunshine and the rest of it is bounced lighting. I think we have a video somewhere. In this scene, EEVEE just is so much better than Cycles, to be honest. Because try path tracing this scene. It's a nightmare. And EEVEE just does it flawlessly and in real time without any noise. You know, it's so much better. In other scenes, Cycles is better, obviously. In this one, EEVEE is. And I was really surprised discovering it. I wouldn't thought it would be possible, you know, to get a sense of proper global illumination in almost real time. Yeah, it is really fun to use.
To find, see if I can find that video.
Yeah, let me help you. I see it on my end where it was. Maybe EEVEE content. EEVEE versus Cycles, the first folder, EEVEE versus Cycles, and there you will find Cycles versus EEVEE. It's called Cycles versus EEVEE.
Square.
Cycles versus EEVEE square.
There you go, found it.
Yeah, so here's Cycles. It's a nightmare for path tracing render engines. The exact setup that you see here on screen is a nightmare. When you have to trace the bounced lighting, it's mainly due to multiple light bounces. And I have an older video card, which is still pretty powerful. Well, relatively. 2080 Ti. But EEVEE just rips through that. You can see it's almost real time.
Yeah, it's true. It does just run through it.
It just takes a bit of time for the noise to settle. You know, due to the deferred render. But in this particular example, EEVEE is better, heads down. EEVEE is also arguably better choice in some scenes that involve a lot of volumetric lights, light shafts specifically.
This is true.
I think there is another example in this very folder with the attic scene. Yeah. This is Cycles. Let's have a look at how it will look when you use EEVEE.
Pop.
Skittish.
Done.
Something like that. You see, just much faster, with pretty much retaining the overall visual quality and fidelity of global illumination even. Yeah, so it's really impressive. It's one of the EEVEE superpowers, the ability to render light shafts in such a manner in real time.
That's true, which leads me on to my next question, which is something I wanted to touch. Because we're talking about lighting contrast, where we have Cycles and EEVEE, where there's EEVEE is good for some things, Cycles good for other things. They can do similar things. There is a new render engine in this age and time, which many people consider it a taboo or something to not hate on due to ethics or the technology. There are some open source solutions and others, but we have raster rendering, we have biased ray traced rendering or unbiased ray traced rendering, where there's two subsectors. Unbiased is where you can tune it, offline, online. But now we have diffusion rendering. So what's your opinion about this new type of rendering technique? Do you think it should be pursued to have it inside of the Blender viewport one day? Will we have EEVEE Cycles diffusion rendering one day? Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Personally, when it just came out, I mean, the whole AI thing, like Mid-Journey, I think Runway was one of the first image generators out there, and I tried it all just to be on that cutting edge and whatever, just to test this new technology. I was kind of seduced by it, fascinated for a few days. It took me a few days to realize that it's at that time was a little bit overhyped, a little bit black boxy. It's for me because I love working in iterative fashion, and not to mention that I love the process of working, because that often escapes the discussion that people can enjoy the process of drawing, the process of creating 3D. Why not? It can be enjoyable if it's not UV mapping and retopology. It can be enjoyable
Or rigging.
sometimes, or rigging. People enjoy it and do it for the sake of satisfying the natural curiosity or for practicing. Like people play guitar for practicing sometimes, not to, to get an astounding output, but just for the sake of doing it. That's often escapes. That's often missed from the conversation that surround the AI topic. So personally, the way I love working is iteratively. And I know that since the beginning of like AI generators, there were new tools invented to bring it somewhat closer to the artistic process of going from rough sketch or rough block out to another level, then to another level, then to polish it gradually. I mean, the control nets and all that stuff, which I'm not terribly proficient with. I'm not an expert when it comes to AI, but there are things that bring it closer to make it feel like it's a tool. But the way it feels right now still, at least in its general slice, is that it's a little bit of a black box, which you just never know how to fully control what comes out and how to iterate upon it, how to even change things after the fact, how to make it predictable, not to mention the ethical aspects surrounding it. What is the data set it was trained on? For me, it's a little bit clearer when you use AI or statistical generators or whatever, however you call it, LLMs, when you use it for stuff like depth map generation. For me, it was one of the areas where I felt it is legitimately useful, because there are no algorithmic depth map generators that can compete with something like depth anything, with the proper model.
That's
so
true.
That's super useful. I'm not entirely sure 100% what was the data set it was trained on. It's mentioned that it was trained on a data set consisting of labeled and unlabeled images. Where do the images come from and all of that? It's still something that has to be settled in a legal way and by public discussions. I think it just requires a bit of time for that process to settle. Because right now we are in the moment, and it will be only possible to connect these dots after the fact, after a few years, pass. It's still a very, very much new technology.
It's interesting, yeah. In my concept, I've been experimenting more with using, for example, open source solutions with Comfy UI models that are open source,
right?
Which gives us a node-based workflow, which gives us the ability to paint out things, generate things into paint, use masks, interpretation. You can use the render buffers to control how things are generated based on the depth and the maps and the normals and whatever else you want to use, or pose detections.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure, especially based on the reactions of the people who watched one of the recent videos.
Yes, you're very brave. You made a video about this.
Yeah. Yeah. 80 was like, are you sure you want to go this direction? I was like, oh, we'll be all right. And I know it's a minefield, but there was not a single negative comment. I mean, with negativity directed towards us. Because we picked the right tone for this video.
Yeah.
And we are part of this community. We're 3D artists. We know how threatening it seems, and we can also feel panic, and we can also feel how it might influence people's jobs and people's income and all that stuff. So yeah, but one of the most common comments was, okay, now make it work for retopology.
Which is starting to happen.
It's slowly starting to happen.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting, which leads me on to my next question. Okay, so you mentioned there was a triangle with stylism, realism, and the other point of abstractions, or don't quite remember the third point. But I consider this with proceduralism,
representational or figurative.
Yeah, we have full automation when it comes to generating or creating content. Then we have procedural generation of content like geometry nodes, shader nodes, and other types of procedural algorithm-based and visual programming-based generation. And then we have linear destructive workflows, which is where you push forward from A to B by doing a sequence of operations to create your element, similar to sculpting or drawing, where Control Z is the only way back. So what do you think about that? As a new person who's getting into the industry, who's starting to learn, and we're at a crux of full automation, procedural automation, and linear workflows. As a student, and from your educator's kind of concept, what would you recommend somebody getting into the industry? What do you recommend them to embrace? What do you think they should be learning? What's the mentality that they should have about all of this?
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend them embrace optionality and put their skin in the game. And basically, if they have some time to try things out before they're locked in to some day job or whatever, I would recommend definitely trying things out, because that's the best way to determine whether you like it or not, whether you have predispositions towards certain things. Maybe you did some drawing when I was a kid. Maybe it will carry over to whatever you want to do in 3D. But then you have to ask yourself if 3D is the right medium for what you want to do. Because that's not given. You might discover that you want to do something else. Maybe you want to tell stories using camera. Why not? Maybe that will lead you to 3D later on. It's very idiosyncratic. It basically, you should analyze the entire story of your life to determine what would be the best point of entry into this. Because I know that people start creating graphics and computer graphics based on very diverse backgrounds. Initially, I came to graphics from music, I think, because I was a guitar player since I was maybe 4 years old. And then I switched over to playing computer games. I got introduced to computer games, and then slowly that evolved into me being interested in certain kinds of computer graphics. Then a random event occurred, like my brother brought me a CD with 3ds Max version 5 or whatever it was. So it's a series of events that eventually brought me where I am right now. For you, it will look different, but it will be a sequence of both the random events, your choices, predispositions, what you can do better, and what you like more. Because maybe you would love playing with Houdini and with simulations. Maybe that is your thing, and you will discover that. And once you discover that, you will basically push through and create something amazing. And that will set you on your path. So I cannot be more concrete than this, Basically, you have to try. You have to be mindful of idiosyncrasies that you have and developed over years. And then just don't be afraid that AI will take your job. Just do your thing. If you love computer graphics, if you want to try it out, nobody will prevent you from doing that.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me just yesterday where I was doing a drawing practice that I do every now and then, and with grease pencil. And he mentioned that, well, the good thing about people having accessible ability to create an image, for example, is that if you're serious about drawing, competition has suddenly been culled. Your value as someone who can draw has gone up, because it's the entry bar to go through the grind, to learn how to do it well, to learn the skills and the artistic fundamentals has become a lot more accessible to everybody, but also a lot more of a mystery if you don't spend the time and effort to figure it out. So as an artist, even if you cover your fundamentals and cover your technicalities in 2D, in 3D, in all other forms that come into your art style and trajectory, then, well, it's still extremely valuable and more valuable now. Which is an interesting thought. I enjoyed that comment.
Especially it takes some time to develop your taste. My God, even if you're going to produce images via diffusion or whatever, you still need taste to be able to pick the best generations or whatever it can be. It requires a lot of time to kind of create the library of proper references in your mind. What is good and what is bad, what feels balanced and what doesn't feel balanced when it comes to formal composition, because that's not given, at least not to all people. Certainly not to me. I had to go through many months and years of just trying things out, just developing my visual library, basically my Pinterest inside my head.
Your Pinterest inside your head. What were your biggest inspirations? How did you feed your brain? Like, you have a very keen eye with your atmospherics, your volumetrics, your stylized realism, your sense of almost monochromatic but a very colorfully balanced greens and oranges and blues and yellows and ochres. How did you get your eye? What were you feeding your mind? What were you?
Yeah, the blues and yellows and ochres are a little bit less balanced in my early works. Recently, checked my earlier works, and there was something going on with the saturation in the yellow tones and stuff like that. I was like, oh, okay. I think I'm a little bit better at it now. I was playing a lot of games. I was watching a lot of movies and stuff, but also I've got into taking photos, into experimenting in studio, into cinematography even. Like, I approached it from that direction as well, and bought myself a lot of photographic equipment, which eventually led us to photogrammetry.
Oh, really?
Like a side quest.
Nice.
Yeah. But actually, I think it's one of the most useful things that an artist can do, a 3D artist, but all kind of artists, is to check the cinematographers and photographers. Like, I have a list. The photographers like Sebastião Salgado. Like Edward Weston, Ernst Haas, like Van Ho. Photographers. Henri Cartier-Bresson, classic. I like
probably butchered
Eugène
the names.
Auger.
Whoa.
Yeah. I want to cry when I just browse through their photos. It's on another level. It's so much better than what I'm doing, but like many more people are doing. It's you have to be inside that craft. You have to just familiarize yourself, or at least just check it out. Cinematographers, like, my God, like Roger Deakins. who shot No Country for Old Men, Sicario, Blade Runner, or
Beautiful.
the Revenant and Birdman cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki. Impeccable. Check these compositions, check these colors.
Really
Wes
gotta,
Anderson movies.
yeah, wait. I'm gonna have to dig up all these names and dig deeper. I know some of the names, some of them are new.
Yeah,
Can't.
so that's in my like folder of inspirations, photographers, cinematographers, hyper-realistic painters. That's kind of, if you check some hyper-realistic paintings, they do look like 3D renders. I really do.
Yeah, they really
The
know their
sense of,
stuff.
yeah, over-exaggerated detail, super sharp, which is rarely seen even in photography, to that degree of sharpness and grit and exaggerated realism. If you're doing 3D art, you have to check hyper-realistic painters. That's for sure.
That's true. Lately, I've been studying a lot about impressionism and the culture that moved them and the people and how they interacted and what happened during that time during the Impressionists movement in the late 1800s. It was interesting, very interesting.
Interesting.
Next, I'll probably be taking a look at the Fauvists, and see
Yeah,
how they
basically
do.
we're old farts. Like, oh, you have to check art history.
I love it.
Take art history.
We got a comment
art
by
history
Paul
lesson.
Guillem Rapui. He says Darius Condi is good. And Bresson is excellent, truly unique framing. They love every step of the mind through their photos, very intense experience.
Very intense.
And all right, so we're getting close to the 1 hour. So I'm going to open up the questions to the audience. If you have a question,
Brilliant.
write it out in the chat and I will read it out here live and you'll get an answer, potentially. But at the end, I wanted to close with this particular question, which is we've had an interesting talk where we've covered like the different concepts of abstractism between realism and stylism and the kind of like angles that you can go towards things. We've had a look at like the polar use cases of EEVEE and cycles and the similarities and the mentality that you need to have to approach it like an artist that works around and hacks around things to make things how you want them to be, to create a stylized realism. We teased the course up coming up. We had a look at some amazing, incredible art and collaborations with various artists, and we've had an excellent list of recommendations. And we had a nice talk of like, okay, what kind of mentality should we have to come into the technologies of computer graphics, which is just branching out to more areas and with new fusion and hybrid workflows of the future. Some things are overhyped, other things could be useful. How do we navigate that? So when it comes to, you mentioned earlier as well that you talked about some lighting techniques with the blocking lights and atmosphere and using rim lights and to bring out some surface scattering, the thickness of the materials and stuff. You really know your tools, the light probes to extend the light influence of the screen space, global illumination and other things. I'm sure your course is going to be gold, as most of them are. So when it comes to fundamental...
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're top of the game. I think you and 80 Burrows, you both have done with Creative Shrimp something absolutely invaluable for the whole entire community.
Thank you so much.
And
that means a lot coming from you. That means a lot to me.
And what example is your attention to detail? Like you're sending me all these references, these recordings, the content, pre-planning, the publicity, pushing the event. It is a big testament to your work ethic and your creativity, and I keep doing that. I want to be like you. I think it's amazing.
It was funny that Adi asked me to send him a few files for some video yesterday. Because I was on that page with you, I basically sent him an archive. 11 gigabytes, like out of a sudden. Here. And he was like, 11 gigs of stuff? I was like, I'm a responsible person. No. You asked for content, so here we go. Just
And I think that
one
to
or
me
two.
is a fine example of professionalism. And that to me is what guarantees you as an artist to some degree is that level of attention detail and professionalism. Timeliness is exemplary. You live what you preach and you show the way forward as an educator, both of you with your endeavors. I just really wanted to say that. Big fan.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we do have a question here. Gleb from White Roosters, have you dabbled with Gaussian splats in Blender at all? And he's looking forward to the next course.
Yeah. In Blender, not yet. I dabbled with point clouds to some extent, and of course with retopologizing the photo scanned assets. I mean the traditionally photo scanned assets. And for Gaussians, I used self-hosted Python thing for calculating Gaussians and stuff like Luma Labs for just making quick previews of the stuff that I capture on my phone and stuff like that. And for proper Gaussian splatting reconstruction, I used this application that I cannot remember how it's even called. Yeah, I need to get back into photogrammetry. Maybe after the EEVEE course, we'll see what we we'll do next.
If you want to use Gaussian
yeah,
splats, just slight interruption. Use Curie Engine, which is a Blender add-on, which has a nice service for Gaussian splats and geometry nodes adaptation with performance optimizations directly in Blender.
The thing about Gaussians, maybe you will educate me, but the thing about Gaussians back in the day, a few years ago, was how to even edit it properly to integrate it into scenes, not just to reconstruct certain environments for virtual fly-through. How to, but I have to educate myself on this.
In this case,
I'm sure the tool have developed since then.
Yeah, Curie Engine will give you the ability to convert Gaussian splat data into geometry nodes, which means it's a point cloud data where you can instance anything onto it, from brushstrokes to actual geometry. So this means you could convert your geometry nodes Gaussian splat into light casting, receiving, and paintable and editable geometry or 3D
how
data.
About the Gaussian's adaptation to change in camera angle, that sort of stuff?
With the
has
reflections?
It been solved? Yeah, has it been solved already, or just partially? Because that's something that I'm not really sure. Oh yeah, you're stumbling across golden content right now.
There's still something there. Oh wow. In this case,
finally, now we're talking.
Well, since you could convert your Gaussian splats into geometry nodes, you can clean up the reflections and then just use normal
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Right now you're seeing the superluminal render farm by Jonas Dichel and Lord Odin. Basically, they provided me with access for testing stuff, and I rendered a few play blasts and animations. Not play blasts, rather final animations, because they don't support play blasts currently. And then I reported some bugs back to them. It was a really funny process. Like when the first 10 frames weren't working, were solid white frames or something like that, spit out, and I just recorded it on my phone and sent back to them like, hey, it's not working here.
Good customer service.
All
right. We have another question, actually. But yeah, Curie Engine. If you do get into Gaussian splats, try out Curie Engine.
Yes.
That gives you a bit more flexibility.
I will do.
All right. So next thing. Niranjan Raghu has mentioned, I've been getting stuck into shader models and how to improve the fall off of light with good photoreal, close to photoreal looks. With 3D art, it's mathematical, of course, but the hyperrealistic paintings, it's an interpretation how the painter observed it. So with 3D, in that case, you are limited by the tool in that regard or case. In your experience, is there a tool set that helps cross the initial mathematical barrier?
Is it mainly to do with lighting in particular?
Seems so.
I think Yeah. In cycles, at least, if I got the question right, you can definitely manipulate the fall off of any light source you want with this stuff like quadratic or whatever else. There is no node for that. In EEVEE, it often, in my experience at least, it often boils down to how close do you place the lights. I know it sounds silly, but as long as you don't see the light source and it doesn't reveal itself via interacting with volume shaders or stuff like that, it really boils down to how close can you put to the model, because the light really doesn't get dimmer over distance, like the photons don't lose energy like we think sometimes they do. Just they lose energy over distance and become dimmer, and that's light fall off. No, it's just less rays hitting that particular object. When you move light further away, just most of the light from this light source just doesn't hit the object. That's why it gets a bit dimmer. So it really matters where you place the light source in relationship to the object that it's supposed to illuminate. And then it boils down to how focused is the light beam. In cycles, it's solved by the beam shape, beam spread parameter.
Mm-hmm.
In real photography, it's solved by the use of the grids they put on your light sources, or the stuff like Fresnel lenses that allow you to focus the light beam. This render is, by the way, by Seth Rutledge in his model. I just created a quick play blast for. Maybe I will animate the water later on. We'll see. So yeah, when it comes to light fall off, it's the placement of light and the beam spread parameter that defines it more than the actual quadratic fall off.
All right, that's good
Hope
tip.
that answers the question.
There is a follow-up question. So how does the light fall off on the surface of the shader? Is there any tool that helps prototype or test this workflow? Or do you do this just running the sliders and getting a feel for it? What's the general workflow that you use? And also, thanks for the answer nonetheless. Highly appreciated.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, as for the shaders, I think I need to wrap my head around it. What does it mean? Particular, do you mean the stylized fall off
I guess so.
on the surface of the shader? Yeah. I need to wrap my head around it just to not spread misinformation right now.
Yeah, this is a difficult thing to answer because you have to you mentioned the research that you put inside of the project that takes a lot longer to get things right because you really want to make sure you're teaching something good.
Thank you so much for your question, Niranjan. You produce amazing art. I'm always fascinated by it.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I gotta look at it.
Yeah, I should. You just have an eye for it. You definitely know your light fall off stuff based on your works.
Okay. We have room for one more question. Similar to your list of photographers, Rollo on YouTube has asked, what are your go-to movies for light and style?
Yeah, any movie shot by Roger Deakins. Basically, any of them. Skyfall, Sicario. I also find the lighting so fascinating in the older movie. I'm not sure that you've watched it. You probably did. Seven, a classical thriller about a maniac. Seven, it's called Seven. Yeah. The lighting in this movie is out of this world. The lighting slash color management slash film, just watch it. I think they used some crazy bits of technology to block the frontal spill in exteriors. Like, you usually expect stuff like that happening in very, very enclosed spaces and in tight shots, close-up or something like that, medium wide. And you don't see it on that scale when they block the frontal spill, like, I don't know, 50 by 50 meters or something like that. And it creates such a crazy look, such a dramatic reverse key lighting where it's so much contrast in exterior between lit and shadowy areas that it is really, really fascinating. Plus the use of lenses, plus just watch it. And sometimes they smuggle in the light sources right within the shot.
Oh, really?
So basically, they you can see it within the shot, like barely disguised with something. They even go as far, if I'm not paranoid, as setting up, the decorations to hide these light sources, like sorting out some shower curtains and stuff, to create a nice Gaussian distribution of light. You have to watch this movie.
Oh, yeah, I gotta do that. Gotta put that into my list. Love it. Okay, everybody. So, thank you, Gleb, and thank you, Creative Shrimp,
Thank you so much.
working on the projects. We had comments also mentioned
Always
that
a
everybody
pleasure.
loved their lighting course. The cinematic lighting and Blender course was awesome for sure. And others in YouTube also mentioned the great content. Some of the first that they saw about Blender was with you. So it's a nice thing to see that kind of a growth. And but
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure creating stuff for you guys. It's a big honor for us to be able to do that. To be able to contribute to the community of like-minded people. We got into Blender watching tutorials of other people,
that's true.
and that was my first impression of this whole thing. Like, oh, it is much better than anything I've seen before in terms of how vibrant is the community and how helpful people are. So I'm just happy to contribute to it, to make it better, help make it better, to contribute to this ecosystem.
That's true.
So we'll keep doing that.
Yeah, talking to collaboration, actually, Blender 5.0 is coming out on the 11th of November, give or take. They need testers, and they need people to iron out the kinks. And B for Artists is also releasing probably a week after, but we are currently in need of a splash screen. So I'll be hosting a small competition or a game, I guess you could say, over the next couple of weeks for the splash screen. So if you want to submit a previous piece of work as a splash screen for B for Artist, feel free. And I will publish the information tomorrow. And at this same time tomorrow, I'll be doing the weekly Being an Artist competition or a show where we have 1 hour to create a full render with a series together live. This isn't streamed, but we just do this for fun every week, every Friday at 1400. Being an Artist, the second show of that one. So join tomorrow if you want to be a part of making something real time. Go for it. And I hope to see you splash screen soon. And I guess this is where we can tie up. There is a bonus question. Do you want this bonus question, Gleb?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of drunk has asked, where did the Creative Shrimp nickname come from?
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
No one has an idea. Yeah, that was quick. First, we called it Blender Game, but then renamed it to Creative Shrimp. Yeah, retroactively, we can try to think of different ways, like Joker in a movie. Yeah, to communicate the intent behind renaming it to Creative Shrimp. Like there are mantis shrimps that have the visual system that is the most advanced out of all living creatures on Earth. They have like 12
legs?
much more.
12
Many
sets
more
of legs?
cones in the eyes.
Cones?
So they, see the broadest spectrum of colors, and you cannot imagine what. Maybe that's could be the reason potentially. But
well, if you started with that, I would have believed everything you say, especially with the colors work that you use.
I wanted it to sound pretty silly.
Oh, that
I
was
think we succeeded with that. Like, just Google. But many companies sound silly.
something silly.
Shell,
Oh, that's good. That's
Apple.
great. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. The next guest in the next show, in the probably a couple of weeks from now, I still haven't confirmed the booking yet, but there is a potential that we're going to be. I'm still need to coordinate it, but the ex-creative director of Gumball, the amazing world of Gumball. So we'll see if we can get them onto the show, and it should be fun. So stay
Thank you
tuned.
so much for inviting me.
Yeah, Gleb, it was an excellent talk. I really like your perspective, your attention to detail, your techniques on the work, and I can't wait to buy this EV course. There's some things I need to learn, especially with that glass stuff. You blew my mind away. All right, so have a good one.
I
Yeah.
will send it to you for early testing anyway. Okay, thank you
All
so
right,
much.
I'll test it. Thanks. All right, talk to you later. I'll end the stream here.
Talk to you later. All right. See you all.
Thank you.